Chapter 1. Before we met the Tiger King. To the dismay of my crumbling sanity and research, began when Matt arrived in Kentucky. I was dealing with a European snob who had a twisted perception of America. One of the first things he said to me was, "Let's go eat. I want McDonald's." I got out of my car and gave him a hug. Years had passed since we had last seen each other. "Whoa," he said. "Don't kiss me, I'm Polish, not French." I laughed. "I've been doing research on hippies. It just seems a normal way to greet friends." He smirked in contempt and said, "Let's get food, I'm starving." Since he didn't have a vehicle and there was no transportation services in Middlesboro, I was his only way around town, so I obliged and took him to get some fast food. The whole time he was telling me about his jobs in Europe. His voice grumbled in what he thought was an English accent, but to most Americans it sounded like a blend of Czech and German. "I started out in the UK, but I worked at Burger King because pay was much better than in Poland. I got $10 an hour making burgers. Eventually I saved enough to buy my first camera." My mind drifted in and out of his words as my eyes scanned the road and surrounding area. The neighborhood we drove through had houses and large yards. They were separated by great lengths. When we got closer to the main part of town, everything had a gloomy appearance. Buildings were closer together. They seemed much older. In downtown, the buildings were so close, some were sharing bricks. From what I observed, most towns in Appalachia are like this. Matt continued. "When I first started cinema, I'd record bands and show them after they played." He paused. "What's the word for when you... how do you say it? Do?" "No idea." He looked frustrated as we got closer to the business district. Buildings were further apart because of parking lots. There were signs everywhere. Everything was lit up. I drove towards the giant glowing M, where he'd buy his McDouble. "When they liked what I showed them, they would hire me to make them music videos. You see, it's that easy to start a business. I had 2 jobs. I saved to move back to Poland and start another company, one of my own." I didn't eat McDonald's and I didn't want to order for him, so when I got to the drive-thru, I leaned my seat back so he could order a meal. He shouted over my chest to the microphone. I didn't have to look at him to hear the mirth in his voice. On the way home, Matt joked with a paper bag lifted up, "It's stuff that pretends to be food." I'm sure his statement would have sounded more eloquent in Polish, but in English, this was a comical truth. After he got his meal, he said, "Let's go back to my house parents." I wasn't sure if this was some kind of Polish means of speech, but house parents made me imagine a woman giving birth to a small house. He was referring to the family who fostered him when Matt was an exchange student. From what I saw, they were nice, but I chose to refer to them as his American parents. "You'd love Poland. Every woman is beautiful. There are memes. Here, look." At a stop sign, he showed me a picture on his smartphone. The photo was split in 2 segments. At the top were Polish women who were very thin with natural blonde hair. At the bottom portion had morbidly obese women wearing 2-piece swimsuits. Their skin was rippled and dimpled and their hair was over-bleached with dark root exposed. "We don't have McDonald's like this, so we're not fat. We eat real food." I didn't eat fast food unless it was given to me. Even then, I would mostly refuse. When Matt and I got back to the house, he went inside. We took off our shoes, went to the kitchen where he ate his burger. He said, "Can you just imagine a film of the way a meal comes and goes?" "No." "Wear a GoPro, eat it, then go to the bathroom and take a It would be hilarious. It would probably win an India Film Award. At least go viral on YouTube." In my mind, I was thinking stuff like that would get him banned. His American mom walked in. She seemed to agree with him, nodding her head as if this was something she'd watch. The obscene images in my mind made my stomach sour. She walked out and Matt whispered, "She's not fat, but she's not like a regular American. They're more European." I was quiet. What he was saying was highly biased and filled with hatred. And my whole deal as a sociologist was to help bring neutrality and understanding, to reduce bias and stereotypes. My goal was to educate. He smiled with lettuce in his teeth. His blonde hair, blue eyes, and pale skin elicited wonder within me as to why most Polish people look like this. Was it the German purging of Jews and people with dark hair and dark skin? Those with dark eyes and hair fled the country with the Jews because they were next. People like me would be subjected to discrimination for not having light hair and blue eyes. Matt asked, "Why are you so quiet? Is something wrong?" "No." He looked at his phone and said, "I tried contacting people, but nobody wants to see me." He was perplexed at the idea of people ignoring him or finding excuses not to visit. Most were probably overweight or black. He and I spoke to the same people in high school. I knew my friends, who used to be acquainted with him, wouldn't like what he had become. Nobody likes a racist unless they are racist. For that to work, they must have the same ethnic identity. Matt was Polish to them and to most everyone else. When Matt wasn't around, our white friends made fun of his name and how he spoke. They'd make jokes like, "How many Polish men does it take to screw in a light bulb?" I defend him. Those jokes don't even make sense. But Polish people are stupid. Have you heard him talk? He messes the same words up in English because he isn't a native speaker. But he writes it better than most Americans. Try talking to him on Facebook Messenger. I'd always try to say something like that to open people's minds. After high school, I went to LMU in Harrogate, Tennessee, and then transferred to ETSU. LMU was too small and too expensive. I had lost my scholarship because my sponsor didn't show up to the meeting, and then our second meeting was through a paper mail alert instead of an email. This was fine, though. I knew people at ETSU. However, friends and acquaintances were not enough to keep me from feeling unsteady. When I was a freshman in high school, I got viral meningitis. The brain damage from the infection caused me to develop bipolar. A week would go by and I wouldn't sleep. I'd be with friends having fun. I'd rarely study. I read every textbook for the semester in the first month of school. After that, I'd draw in class and make occasional notes. My memory was nearly photographic. When I took tests, I could close my eyes and reread the textbooks and notes on the back of my eyelids. Despite how powerful my memory was, I felt like I was cheating in a way to get through college. Yet I had read some misinformation online that everyone has the ability to access 100% of their brain, and everyone has the ability to remember everything they ever experienced. That was a lie. It wasn't until I read a book on neurobiology that I understood otherwise. Later in my life, I experienced more head injuries that resulted in memory loss along with derealization hallucinations. It was in this mindset that I thought everyone was able to think as fast as me and remember everything. The misinformation on the internet led me to become depressed. I thought everyone in the world was intentionally being as stupid as they could so they could have an unspoken agreement on how to get away with as little work as possible, to have an excuse for ill-placed logic and emotions. Sometimes at a party, I'd see friends have sex in front of everyone. They'd get cheered on, and when embarrassed, they'd go to a bedroom. One of the females was known to have HIV, and another had herpes. Everyone knew, but they all had sex with each other without protection. This made me feel like everyone around me was doomed to destroy their lives and potentially have unwanted children with congenital STDs. During a long week of insomnia, I stared out my dorm window. I had observed the train come at nearly the exact same time every day. I had tried a whole because regular doses were not helping. This just made me feel the torment in both body and mind. There was a spiraling terror through me, as if my whole body and brain were yawning. There was no release and my soul was gasping for spiritual air. After 3 days, I began to hallucinate. But after a whole week, I felt like nothing was real. To escape the sensation of spiritual suffocation, I laid on the train tracks. The sun was hot above me, even though the autumn air was cool. My stomach was full of... My head hurt so bad I wanted to... On the tracks, I fell asleep for about an hour. The train didn't come, so I went up a hill with the thought that I would continue in my life agony. A few days later, I awoke at a friend's apartment without knowing what happened the rest of that day. A friend, Anna, said, "I saw you lying in a parking lot beside your car." Was I sleeping? No, you were just lying there. They said they thought you were on. They were about to call the cops. Trying to give me those... It was fine. I told them you were my cousin's friend, Seth Turner. She laughed. After they left, you said you were hit in the head or something. Said you hit yourself, I think. I didn't see that, but Frank and I took you to Walmart. You kept yelling, "Oh, Frank," and pushed food off shelves. Frank shouldn't do that.
He knows better.
Anna laughed. You were doing it. Frank was standing nearby. You can't steal my name, Mark. It doesn't work that way. Their description seemed legitimate. I got completely weird when I didn't sleep and combined and a head injury. Had gone completely insane to the point where I didn't remember any of that. Anna said, "I didn't know what to do, so I took you to my boyfriend's place. He and Frank have been looking after you. Did anyone wipe?" Ew, no, James, her boyfriend blurted out in disgust. I looked at Frank. He shook his head and laughed. "Does anyone have ass? You shouldn't be forgetting," Anna consoled. "You just had a serious brain injury. I don't remember any of that. But if I did, let's celebrate my survival." After that incident, something in me changed. There was less clamor in my head. Everything was a little more difficult. After a few months, the brain fog vanished, but I was left with a crater in a once fertile valley of my imagination. The innovative and sporadic thoughts were now hyper-focused and detailed. The words had shifted from the front of my head to the back. The way I used my brain was changing. I was realizing the friends I had at ETSU were not doing anything with their lives. Even if they graduated, they would not leave to do much for society. They were not like me. They did not have a compulsion, the way a magnet pulls iron towards it, the way fire causes rockets to shoot to the sky and explode in flaming bits of colored metal oxide. Brian's eyes were huge. In his mind, he saw terrible things. The world is ending and there is nothing we can do about it. People worship money instead of the land and stars.
or the gods who they represent, the land and stars. They change their ways to go to banks to pray. They go to work to serve their new god. They're destroying everything. Things have been bad. They can get better. There is progress being made already. He looked at me wide-eyed. Did you know there is a trash island the size of Texas? And some new innovative engineer has created robots to clean it up. Most people aren't as destructive or greedy as those who make a wreck of the planet. Most of us are trying to live. They don't worship money. That's mostly psychopaths. We see everything objectively as a computer game. But I didn't want to give in. Even if we switch to biodegradable products, there is all that plastic in the environment. I assured him. And I was given confidential information from a chemist. I know that there are naturally mutated bacteria that are breaking it down into glycol. These genes are being inserted into other bacteria, ones that can survive in more toxic climates and won't
harm a million life.
For a moment he was pensive, then replied, I did some undergraduate research. We modified bacteria to convert mercury into organic mercury in a polluted lake. It just sank into the bottom and are unable to be absorbed into the wildlife. The fish returned and everything looked normal only after a year. So you understand the basics of how this will go. It might take hundreds or thousands of years, but it will mostly be sorted out. The microplastics will mostly remain to cause harm to our endocrine systems. That just means there will be a lot more. It means art is going to change and the price of housing will go down within the next generation or so. Supply and demand. The housing is only going to go up. It all depends on who inherits it, and if they know what to do with it. Logically, it would be most people aren't business minds. They're greedy. And there are other ways to live, to escape that problem. Do you know about sustainable living communities?
Like twin farms in Virginia?
Yeah, that was actually going to be on our list, but it didn't make it. They already have enough publicity that yes. You might be onto something. If we as a people work together in a social movement, we could overthrow the oligarchy in silent rebellion. The dollar is a transition of choice. It's a vote for your ruler. Spend it where you'll see the most benefit for yourself and the next 7 generations. And you voted for your future. Grandchildren and their children. The conversation was going perfectly. Though I was struggling to convince him, some people called him the Brain, because it looked similar to his name, but most of all it's because he was smart. I asked, you know Matt, who Galka used to own Poland's 3rd largest media company? He's going to be our director and cameraman. He's going to get these film awards, and we're going to get this thing on TV. Even if it's some documentary channel, we're going to fight the good fight, and we'll show people what the world is like.
Matt stared at me with a half smirk. You look like there's something wrong with you. After having a brain infection, I'd get trapped in these staring spells. I'd gaze, sometimes unable to move or speak. My head would be flooded with images from the past. I'd see thousands of years worth of time in seconds. In other moments, I'd lose consciousness.
Everything would go black.
Other times, I'd be trapped in a memory flashback. I suppose that's what happened when I was sitting there with Matt. My mind had wandered back to
when I had got a head injury on the train tracks at ETSU and Anna saved me from being arrested from having a concussion. At that particular moment, I didn't feel like there was anything wrong.
At that particular moment, I didn't feel like there was anything wrong. He demanded, "Tell me what's wrong." I felt like punching him. I felt completely fine, but his insistence seemed like he was somehow trying to insult me. I shook my head. There was nothing to say to a question with no answer. Nor was there a use in answering a question that implied insult. "You're too skinny for an American. Maybe you need some McDonald's." I shook my head, realizing he was taunting me and was attempting to assert dominance. He was using manipulation tactics disguised as a joke. "Spy, you're not American. If you don't eat McDonald's..."
A slight smile forced itself on my face.
His mock seriousness was hard. to not be amused at. I detested any bigotry, but I understood he was at what we call crossroads in sociology. He was technically both American and Polish. He was born in New York City but had spent most of his life in Poland. He told everyone he was American when he was here, but they demanded more of the truth. His English was hard, and people often thought he was German. He broke his facts down so they understood how he was Polish but was also American.
He was born here.
I glanced at Matt and said, "I'll eat peanut butter later." He said, "Okay," then took a bite from his burger, eyeing me with mock suspicion. While he was eating, I texted a couple of people I might.
While he was eating, I texted a couple of people
I knew might get along with him, my friends Hope and Brian. They didn't have anything going on in their lives because they had been unemployed at the time. Hope was known to be likable. She had many friends. She would get along with almost anyone. I guess she could help with our show. Brian was a guy I had picked up while doing research on hippies. He was a chemist who made DMT and LSD among other hallucinogens. I met him through a hippie girl I went to CNA school with. Unfortunately, I would later learn that Brian was a very intense person to be around. He was mostly quiet or asked questions, but when he spoke, it was all doomsday talk. What?
I had left him by a lake to learn a lesson from nature.
I left him with lentils, rice, a water filter, and a cook pot. It was better than what the hippies did. My friend Hope messaged me on Facebook to say I could visit. I didn't bring Matt. I left him with his American family. I told him I would visit the next day with people who would help with the documentary. Hope had been a long-time friend since I was a senior in high school and she was in middle school. I would meet her after I read books to kindergartners who struggled with learning. When I was done, I had 10 minutes and nothing to do before school was officially released. Hope had some athletic class and was let out early. I don't know how she got them, but she always had some. At the time, we would often share a smoke along with jokes behind the school dumpster.
That's a good one.
Some people mature quicker than others, while some never mature. This was a great mistake that I later learned when Brian was on the road trip. At Hope's grandparents', I looked around. It was an old trailer near some trees, casting shade on a dirt road. A large drainage ditch had become some kind of semi-dry stream for animals and water plants. After getting a look, I walked to the building. It had been 8 months since I saw her. After knocking at the thin trailer door, an older woman answered, asked, "Hope here?" She yelled into the back, "Oh, some boy's here to see you!" Swirled out of the building and surrounded me with the coolness of AC. Soon Hope was at the door, gave me a hug, and asked, "Need a shower?" Yeah. I wasn't sure if I stank. I had showered a day ago at a different friend's house. But she knew what I had been up to. She knew I might not have another opportunity for a while. So, when I was traveling in Colorado, I met people in communities obsessed with. She was living near the military base where her husband worked. She moved there about the same time. We only discovered by coincidence that we had been in the same city. We'd meet once a week, I'd shower, and then we'd volunteer. Almost every time I did some charity work, they'd give me a free meal. Sometimes I'd get an entire box of food. This also gave me relevant work experience, which prevented a gap in my resume. Thus, when I tried to get a job, I'd use the contracts. With a friend way out there, getting a job was easier because Hope let me use her address to obtain a legal driver's license. With the status and appearance of having an address, I got 3 job offers in my first week there. I took the easiest one, a job as an English teacher at a private school, helping disabled children and young adults get a GED. Recently, I learned Hope moved back to Kentucky about the same time I returned to Tennessee. Before seeing Matt, I thought it was best to see why she was staying with her family instead of her husband. I got some clean clothes from my car and then went to her place. After my shower, she and I sat on the porch and talked. We had a casual conversation. What brings you back to Kentucky anyway? Oh, that. Guy cheated on me. We're divorced now. Yeah, I felt like pulling her hair out, but it's not her fault. He did us both wrong. I feel that. Anyway, what are you up to these days? You remember Matt Hausch Gugalka? No? Polish. Okay, so what about this Matthews? Matt came back. We're working on a documentary. No way. Yeah. We're basically going on a road trip to interview some hippies and communities. Oh, that's awesome, dude. You're welcome to come if you want. For real? Yeah, if you're up to it. I'm in. Chapter 1, Break 6. Later that day, I messaged Eli. What's going on? Is that Sky still in the woods? He was talking about my friend Brian. I replied, probably. Maybe some eagle carried him away. Waves of regret came over me. Perhaps my methods of dealing with Brian were too hard. He wasn't normal, and his strangeness wasn't anything I could deal with on intuition. Teaching someone about homelessness isn't easy in a classroom. Showing them a few minutes doesn't suffice either. They need to live it for a few days. But I was thinking he might not be fit to survive that kind of life or be interested in the documentary. Brian was only good at chemistry and reading books. I was beginning to doubt if he'd even be help to our project. Yet with everything as it was, I didn't have time to drive him back to West Virginia. I'd ask him, and if he wanted to stay, I'd take him with us. Otherwise, I'd have to drive him all day and night to leave him at his father's and get back to Matt's